Most people collect things: postcards, little spoons from tourist traps, photographs. Me, I collect experiences and feeling. It's the only currency that's ever made any sense. I've worked as a bartender in a sweaty Bangkok dive just to feel the thrum of 1,000 untold stories vibrating through the sticky floorboards. Picked grapes in a Tuscan vineyard to feel the specific burn of the sun on my neck and the ache in my lower back. And slept under the stars in the Moroccan desert to feel the profound, crushing weight of an endless silence. At 28, my life was a chaotic, beautiful tapestry woven from these moments. My entire purpose was to feel everything as deeply and as honestly as I could. I was in a forgotten little town tucked into the misty mountains of rural Romania when I first heard the whispers. It was a place of deep greens and damp, earthy smells, where time seemed to move as slowly as the fog rolling down the hillsides. I was working at the town's only inn, the Hanul Veki, pouring lukewarm beers for old men with secrets carved into their faces like wrinkles, and changing sheets that always felt faintly damp. I was there to feel the texture of a life untouched by the frantic rush of the world I'd run from. It was a good feeling, a quiet one. The gentle melancholy of the rain, the simple warmth from the hearth, the shared, unspoken history in the room. It was peaceful, but quiet was never the point. My real journey, the one that started long before I ever packed a bag, was an escape from a different kind of quiet. A sterile, suffocating silence that smelled of bleach and regret. My childhood home wasn't a place of warmth. It was a museum of restraint. Every wall was a pale, flat beige. Every piece of furniture was practical, joyless, chosen for its utility and lack of character. We were a fundamentalist family, where emotion was a weakness, a sin, and spontaneity was the devil's idol work. I remember being 6 and skinning my knee on the pavement. When I ran inside crying, hot tears of shock and pain streaming down my face, my mother didn't hug me. She cleaned the wound with a sharp-smelling antiseptic, her touch efficient and distant, and told me, "The Lord tests us with pain. Crying doesn't honor his trial." Laughter was to be stifled, excitement was viewed with suspicion, and a hug was a carefully rationed commodity, reserved for arrivals and departures. My parents loved God, and they taught me that God loved silence. So my whole world was muted, as if a thick blanket of guilt was thrown over everything bright and beautiful. I didn't just feel nothing. I was taught that feeling nothing was the goal. It was piety. It was peace. To me, it was a living death. That's why I ran. That's why I chased this storm of sensation across the globe. It's not just wanderlust, it's a rebellion. Every new taste, every breathtaking view, every stranger's touch is a prayer to a different kind of God. The one I'm convinced lives inside the frantic, messy pulse of a beating heart. My deepest fear, the one that shadows me even on the sunniest days, isn't of dying. It's the terror of being dragged back into that emptiness. The horror of having my senses erased, my joy consumed, and my spirit hollowed out until I'm nothing but a quiet, empty, beige-colored room again. I was chasing the ultimate experience, the one that would finally, permanently overwrite the silence. And that's when I first heard the story about the abandoned sanatorium on the peak of the mountain, a place the locals called Echo Vide, the empty echo. They said you didn't just see things there. They said if you were lucky, it let you feel everything. And if you weren't, it would take every feeling you ever had. For a moment, my pulse quickened. The ultimate gamble. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt cheap. A ghost story. Someone else's horror. I wasn't chasing a thrill. I was chasing something real, something sacred. My search went deeper past the tourist traps and into the dark corners of the internet, through cryptic forums and forgotten travel blogs with broken links. On a page that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005, buried in a thread about transcendental experiences, I found a single, strange entry. It spoke of a substance in a remote province of the Philippines, a place where you could feel not just everything, but the source of everything. The entry was short, rambling, and probably written by someone high on something else entirely, but 3 words burned into my brain. It called it Alikabok de Dios, the dust of God. 2 weeks later, my flight was touching down in Manila. The Romanian quiet was a distant memory, swallowed by the roar of the jet engines and the frantic beating of my own heart.
The air in the Philippines was a physical thing. It wasn't like breathing. It was like drowning slowly in a warm, wet blanket of life. The smells of diesel fumes, frying garlic, and blooming flowers hit me all at once. I took a series of rattling buses and rickety jeepneys, pushing deeper and deeper into the country until I found the village mentioned in the forum post. It clung to the edge of an emerald jungle, a place so green it seemed to vibrate. I found a guest house made of bamboo and thatch, and it was on the porch of that guest house, overlooking the endless wall of trees, that I first saw him. He was a backpacker, maybe a few years younger than me, with sun-bleached hair and the kind of tan that takes months to build. He should have looked like the picture of health and freedom, but he was utterly, unnervingly still. He just sat there in a rattan chair, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He wasn't looking at the jungle, or the sky, or the other travelers. He was just there, for hours. It was the way he looked at the world that first unsettled me. He didn't seem sad or bored. He seemed vacant, like a beautifully decorated house with nobody home. I felt an inexplicable pull, a chilling sort of kinship. I bought a bottle of water and sat down at the table across from him. He didn't seem to notice until I cleared my throat and spoke. "Some view, huh?" I said, gesturing with my bottle at the jungle. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet mine, were as clear and blue and empty as a cloudless sky. It was like looking into a photograph of an ocean. You could see the color, but you couldn't feel the depth or the movement. The chlorophyll in the leaves absorb blue and red wavelengths of light and reflect green, he said. His voice was quiet, toneless, perfectly even. I blinked. Right. Well, it's beautiful. Beauty is a subjective neurochemical response to specific patterns. And then he fell silent again, his gaze dropping back to his coffee cup. His name was Ben. We talked for a while, or rather, I talked, asking questions, trying to find a flicker of a person behind those eyes. He answered in that same quiet, matter-of-fact way. I asked him what brought him here, to the sleepy little corner of the world. A small, strange twitch that might have once been a smile touched his lips. "I came for the feeling," he said, his voice flat. "The big one, the last one." The humid air grew cold. My skin prickled. I knew he was the reason I was there. "The dust of God?" I whispered. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. The blue emptiness of his eyes seemed to darken for a fraction of a second, like a shadow passing over the water. It was the ghost of a remembered terror. "You've heard of it," he stated. It wasn't a question. He told me the story. He'd been like me, a thrill seeker, an adrenaline junkie, always chasing a bigger high, a deeper meaning. He'd heard the same whispers I had about the dust of God, and he'd found it. He described an ancient banyan tree deep in the jungle and a gentle old man who guarded the dust. He told me how the man had warned him, his eyes full of pity, but how he hadn't listened. He was too hungry, too arrogant. He described the ritual. A pinch of shimmering silver gold sand dropped into a small flame. The fire burned green, and then pink, and then a blue I'd never seen before, and then white, a white that was every color and no color at all. He paused, looking down at his hands resting on the table. They were perfectly steady. "For 1 second, Maya," he whispered, and his voice cracked, a dry, dead sound like leaves crunching underfoot. I felt it all. The creation of a son, the love of every mother for her child, the precise pain of every broken bone, the birth of the universe and its final, cold death. Everything, all at once. He picked up his cold coffee, swirled it, and stared into the black liquid. It took my ability to feel anything at all. It didn't just scoop out the sadness or the fear. It took the joy, the anger, the hunger, the warmth of the sun on my skin. He said looking up at the oppressive midday heat is just an external temperature of 34 degrees Celsius. The taste of this coffee, he took a sip, it's just bitter alkaloids and hot water. It's all just a memory of a feeling now, a word without a definition, an echo in an empty room. I should have run. A sane person would have packed their bags, walked out of that guest house, and booked the first flight out of that jungle to anywhere else on Earth. Ben was the living embodiment of my deepest fear. He was the beige room made flesh. But I couldn't shake his description of that one perfect second. His warning was the most terrifying thing I had ever heard, but the experience he described was the most beautiful. The answer to every question I'd ever had. I found myself trying to poke holes in his story, trying to find a way out that wasn't just running away. Maybe it affected you differently, I offered, my voice then. Maybe you had a bad reaction. Ben's hollow eyes settled on me. It's not a drug, Maya. It's not a reaction. It's a transaction. You trade a lifetime of muted colors for 1 second of true light, and the price is absolute. He stood up, his movements fluid and economical. He don't look for it. Your quiet, little feelings are more precious than you know. He left his coffee on the table and walked away, his back straight, his steps even, disappearing into the guest house without a single backward glance.
I spent the next 2 days in a fever. I tried to heed Ben's warning, I really did. I'd stayed on the porch reading a tattered paperback, trying to focus on the words, but my eyes kept drifting to the impenetrable green wall of the jungle. I saw Ben at breakfast, eating his toast with a clinical precision, his face a placid mask. He was a constant, terrifying siren call. His emptiness was a dare. The logical part of my brain, the small, scared part, screamed at me to get out. I even packed my bag one morning, my hand shaking, convinced I was going to walk down to the village and find a bus, any bus, heading back to civilization. But I couldn't do it. The hunger that had driven me across the world was a physical ache in my chest, a famine of the soul that wouldn't be satisfied with the scraps of feeling I'd been collecting. Ben's warning had backfired. He had confirmed the legend was real. I started asking around the village, discreetly at first. I'm interested in local folklore, I'd say to the women selling fruit by the roadside, ancient traditions. The moment I mentioned a banyan tree or a wise man of the forest, their faces would close up. They'd shake their heads, a fearful, superstitious look clouding their eyes, and turn away, suddenly busy. They knew, but they wouldn't talk. Their fear was like gasoline on the fire of my obsession. What could be so terrible and so powerful that an entire village would conspire to hide it in silence? On the third day, I gave up on subtlety. I found a group of kids playing with a worn-out soccer ball in the dust. I bought them all cold sodas from the local store. As they drank, I asked them about the jungle. It was a young boy, maybe 10 years old, with big, dark eyes, who finally broke. For the price of another soda and a chocolate bar, he pointed a small, hesitant finger down a path that was barely more than a whisper in the dense green wall of the jungle. "The old man stays by the tree that holds up the sky," he said in a hushed voice before his friends pulled him away, scolding him in their local dialect. He looked back at me once, his eyes wide with fear he was too young to understand.
The hike was grueling, a battle against the jungle itself. The air was so thick with humidity it felt like breathing through a wet cloth. Grasping vines studded with thorns snagged at my clothes, and the ground was a treacherous soup of mud and roots. The world was a deafening chorus of buzzing insects, screeching birds, and the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. For hours, I walked toward the heart of that deep green silence, my fear and my desire wrestling inside me with every step. My mind raced. This was insane. I was following the directions of a child to find a mythical substance based on the warning of a man who was clearly broken. But then I would remember the beige house, the silent dinners, my mother's disappointed face when I laughed too loud. The fear of that life was greater than my fear of the jungle. I pushed on. And then I saw it. After hours of claustrophobic green, the canopy opened up into a small sun-dappled clearing. In the center was the banyan tree. It wasn't just a tree, it was a cathedral. Its trunk was a gnarled, colossal pillar, and 1,000 thick roots snaked down from its branches, forming a labyrinth of living wood that seemed to breathe with an ancient rhythm. It was a place outside of time. And sitting at its base, cross-legged and perfectly still, was a man. He was old, with skin like wrinkled parchment and long silver hair tied back from his face. He wasn't what I expected. There was no menace in him, no air of a powerful shaman. There was only a profound, heartbreaking sadness that seemed to radiate from him like heat. He looked up as I approached, and his eyes, dark, gentle, and impossibly old, seemed to already know my entire story. He knew about the beige house. He knew about the rebellion. He knew why I was there.
I stopped a few feet from him, my breath catching at my throat. The sounds of the jungle seemed to fade away, leaving only the soft hum of the clearing. He didn't speak, he just watched me, his gaze holding not judgment, but a deep, weary compassion. It was the look of a man who had seen the same story play out 1,000 times and already knew its tragic ending. I felt utterly transparent, my carefully constructed identity as a world traveler, a free spirit, stripped away, leaving only the raw, desperate hunger underneath. Without a word, he reached into a small, woven pouch at his side and poured a tiny mound of shimmering sand into his palm. It was exactly as Ben had described it, but so much more. It was a cascade of microscopic stars, a river of silver and gold light that swirled and moved as if it were alive. "The dust of God," he said, his voice as soft as moss. He looked from the dust in his hand to my face, his eyes full of sorrowful pity and honesty. "It will give you the 1 second you have spent your whole life searching for," he said gently. "The answer to everything. The feeling of God, but it will be the last thing you ever truly feel." He held his hand out to me, the galaxy of dust waiting. "It takes the container as well as what it contains. You will remember joy, but the memory will be a hollow shape. You will remember love, but the word will have no weight. You will be an echo." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent air. "Tell me," he asked, his voice filled with a terrible kindness, "is it worth it?" I looked at the shimmering dust, a universe of possibility in his wrinkled palm. Behind his sad eyes, I saw Ben's empty blue gaze. I saw a flash of my childhood, me at 8 years old, hiding in my closet to cry silently after my father told me my excitement over a birthday present was ungodly. The beige walls, the sterile quiet, the stifled laughter. I saw a lifetime of running from that nothingness. And here it was, the final terrifying dare, the ultimate escape or the ultimate prison. Ben's warning was a scream in my memory, but the hunger that had driven me across the world was louder. It was a famine of the soul, and this was the only feast that could ever satisfy it. To feel it all just once, to finally, truly overwrite the silence. "Yes," I said,
My voice was a stranger's, thin and reedy. The sadness in his eyes deepened into a quiet resignation. He nodded once, a gesture of profound finality. From his pouch, he took a small clay candle holder and a stub of a candle. He lit it with the wooded match, the flame a tiny defiant orange against the deep green shadows of the banyan. The air grew still, the jungle's incessant chorus seeming to hold its breath. He gestured for me to sit, and I folded my legs, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. He held his hand over the flame, and with the gentle tip of his hand, he let the dust fall. It didn't sprinkle. It cascaded, a river of light into the fire, and the world went silent. The flame did not flicker. It erupted, a column of silent, impossible color shot toward the canopy. First green, it wasn't the color of leaves or emeralds. It was the color of life itself. A wave of pure, absolute joy crashed over me. A bliss so complete it was agonizing. I felt the ecstatic push of a sapling breaking through the earth, the mindless rapture of a cell dividing, the sheer unthinking pleasure of photosynthesis turning light into being. I laughed, a sound that was ripped from my lungs because the universe was a joke of such stunning, brilliant beauty. Then the light shifted to pink, and I was drowning in love. Not the simple human kind. All of it. The fierce, desperate love of a mother shielding her child from a predator. The achingly sweet, clumsy love of a first kiss. The profound, quiet love of an old man holding his dying wife's hand. The unconditional love of a dog for its owner. I felt every heartbreak that had ever paved the way for a deeper connection, every sacrifice made in its name. It was a tidal wave of every connection that had ever been, and my own small heart swelled until it felt like it was shattered into a million pieces. The pink bled into a deep oceanic blue, and the pain came. With the memory of all of that love came the agony of all of its loss. I felt the singular sharp grief of every child who ever lost a parent. I felt the cold dread of every soldier dying on the battlefield, the burning shame of every betrayal, the gnawing terror of every final breath. It was a plunge into a bottomless ocean of sorrow, and I was breathing in, my spirit crushed under the weight of a billion private tragedies. I wept without tears, my body a vessel for a sorrow too vast for any single soul to contain. And then, just as Ben had promised, the blue was consumed by white. It was not a color. It was the absence and the entirety of color. It was a light that was also a sound that was also a thought. My consciousness, my Maya, was ripped from my body and stretched across the canvas of existence. I was there for the silent, violent birth of the first star. I felt the slow, patient grinding of tectonic plates and rage of a supernova, the cold, serene loneliness of a rogue planet drifting in the void. Time dissolved. I experienced the beginning of the universe and its final cold, whimpering death in the same singular instant. In that unbearable, infinite second, I felt everything. And I, Maya, the girl who collected feelings, wasn't there at all. I was a single grade of stand on an endless beach. A thought, a desperate final flicker of self, screamed, "This is a mistake. I want to go back. I don't want this." It was a pathetic attempt at an escape, a tiny hand pushing against a collapsing star. I want my sadness. I want my small joys. I want my life. But you cannot bargain with an absolute. My identity, my memories, my carefully constructed collection of feelings, it was all just fuel for that silent white fire. It was consumed utterly. And then, nothing.
I was sitting in the clearing, The candle was a wisp of smoke. The old man was still there, looking at me, his face a mask of ancient sorrow. The sun was warm on my skin. I could register the temperature, approximately 28 degrees Celsius, factoring in the 80% humidity. The leaves of the banyan were a vibrant green, a specific wavelength of light, approximately 530 nanometers, hitting my retina. I could hear the buzz of an insect, likely a species of cicada, its call a mating signal, with a frequency of 4.3 kilohertz. The world was a flood of data, precise and clear, a high-resolution photograph with all the metadata attached. But the all was gone. The warmth was just a fact, not a comfort. The beauty was a series of patterns, not a feeling. I looked at the old man, this being who had just witnessed the complete annihilation of a soul. I felt no anger, no fear, no gratitude. I simply registered his presence. I cataloged the deep lines on his face, the silver of his hair, the texture of the woven pouch. He gave me another slow, sad nod. The transaction was complete. It was the logical time to leave. I stood up, my limbs moving with perfect efficiency, and walked back down the path, leaving the cathedral of the banyan tree behind. I did not look back. There was no reason to. The path was an easily recalled sequence of turns and obstacles. I now reside in a sterile, silent apartment in Brisbane, Australia. I'm a travel writer. It is a logical profession, as my memory is flawless. I have perfect recall of every place I have ever been, every meal I have ever eaten. I can describe the taste of a ripe mango from a street market in the Philippines with exacting detail. The precise balance of sweetness, fructose, sucrose, and acidity, citric, malic, the fibrous texture against the tongue, the exact shade of sunset orange. I can write about it, and my readers tell me they can almost taste it themselves. They say I have a gift for evoking emotion. This is an irony, a concept I understand intellectually. My apartment is beige. The furniture is functional. There are no postcards, no souvenirs. They are unnecessary data points. The only sound is the persistent low hum of the refrigerator's compressor cycle. It reminds me of the silence in the house I grew up in. I thought that silence was a prison I needed to escape. I spent my life running from it, filling my head with the noise of the world, with the symphony of human feeling. Now I understand. Silence isn't an absence of sound. It's an absence of meaning. My parents visited last week. They flew in from the quiet town where they still live their quiet lives. They had been worried. My emails had changed. They were less chaotic, was the word my mother used. They sat on my practical gray sofa, looking around the clean, uncluttered space. They saw me. They saw my placid expression, my calm, steady hands. They saw that the frantic, rebellious storm in my eyes had finally passed. "Oh, Maya," my mother said. And for the first time in my life, I registered the data points of pure, unadulterated joy in her voice. A raised pitch, an increased heart rate I could see in the pulse of her throat. "Oh, Maya, you're so peaceful. The Lord has answered our prayers. He's finally quieted your spirit." My father nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face, relaxing the zygomaticus major muscles. He said, "You see? I told you. She just needed to find her way. All that running around is over." They are happy. They believe I have been saved. In a way, they are correct. They have finally gotten the daughter they always wanted, a quiet girl in a quiet room. I am pious. I am that peace. I am a living death. I did it to myself. I chased the ultimate experience and it worked. The ghosts of the beige house are gone. Everything else is gone too. I sit by the window and I watch the world. I see couples laughing and I can catalog the physiological signs of happiness, the crinkling of the orbicularis oculi muscles, the baring of teeth. I see children crying and I can identify the patterns of grief. It's all a broadcast on a frequency I can no longer receive. I'm a library of facts about a world I can no longer touch. And I will sit here, in the quiet, and I will catalog it all until my body ceases to function. It was worth it. That is the last thing I remember feeling.
It was a lie.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.